Welcome back to the Garden with Joe and Holly radio show. Moments away, Joe Lampel, host of PBS's Growing a Greener World, and he's got a new book out. But first, Holly, Simple Grow. Feed your plants so they can be happy, healthy, all growing season.
Yeah, are you worried about your plant growth? Provide your plants with what they need to grow to their potential with Simple Grow. Simple Grow offers 100% organic worm castings at simplegrow.com. Unlike other worm casting products that you order from Simple Grow, you are getting 100% worm castings, not filler plus castings. Promote ideal soil structure and aeration with Simple Grow all natural odor-free worm castings. There's only one ingredient, worm castings. No chemicals or additives will seep into your food, and it doesn't smell like other fertilizers. For indoor and outdoor use, you can find all the information at simplegrow.com. Find out more at simplegrow.com.
Holly, let's go to the Proclamation Hotline, sponsored by Proclamation Goods, and bring in our guest for this week.
Joe Lampel is the host of Growing a Greener World, which has been on PBS for 12 seasons. He's also an author, podcaster, home gardener, and has a passion for living an eco-friendly lifestyle. Welcome to the program, Joe.
Hey, Holly. Hey, Joey.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. You're a very busy individual, and we're happy that you've made time for Holly and myself and all of our listeners across the country. And I think we're all going to learn a few things in this short period of time.
Thank you.
What is one of your biggest and maybe surprising successes in your garden this year? What blew you away that, I didn't expect that?
I love that question. You know, something that jumped out at me as you were asking me that is my tomato season was really good this year. And it's not that I don't have good years all the time. It's just that where I live in Zone 7B and just north of Atlanta, Georgia, it's very hot, it's very humid, and that is the enemy to tomato growing success. It's really hard to grow tomatoes for a full-on season beyond just the initial harvest and keep them going because, they'll continue to produce until that first frost kills them back if conditions are right. But down here, it's like you're fighting an uphill battle. But this year, unlike previous years where I was pulling my plants out sometime by mid to late July and I didn't even have tomatoes in my garden by August, this year I've got several in the garden. Here we are September something, and I've got some really nice looking plants still in the garden. That's because I left a few of them alone because I knew instinctively that if I could just wait it out, potentially they could fix themselves. Once they got past the pest and disease cycles, they could restore and recover and, basically regenerate. And they have. And now I kind of wish I'd done that with more of the plants, but at least I have a few out there. So my big aha, Joey, is that I'm still harvesting tomatoes as we speak from a few plants in my garden, whereas in previous years that never would have been the case this time of the year.
Well, you've got tomatoes, and we had a lot of places in the northern parts of the country has had horrendous tomato harvest, and we were included in that. There's other people that, like you, couldn't have a better harvest, but the nights were too warm for us, and we've gotten about 10 tomatoes off of 100 plants this year, and it's really been a terrible season for that.
Hey, for what it's worth, Joey, I talk to people all over the country with my students in the Online Gardening Academy all the time. And across the country, it's been a really hard year, a really, really hard year.
That's helpful to know. So speaking of failures, what was one of your failures or learning experience this year in your garden?
Well, I don't know that it was a failure, but it's an ongoing challenge with growing cucurbits and a squash vine borer on my squash plants and my pumpkins and winter squash. And after this year, Holly, with the challenges that I, along with everybody else that grows squash, has with the squash vine borer, that basically decimates your plants earlier than later, I'm taking the challenge on to come up with a system that incorporates early screening and detection, trapping the male squash vine borer, because when he shows up, trouble's ahead with the female and egg laying. So your precursors, identifying that, and then dealing with proactive measures to put barriers in place, self-pollinate, use BT or whatever you need to do. And then beneficial nematodes, once they pupate back in the soil, I'm on a campaign to figure this thing out, because I can tell you, from our audience, it's the biggest challenge going across the board when growing food. And I want to provide a game plan and a map and a program to help people do that. But for me, it was another year of frustration. And it's one of the reasons I don't really love growing squash or cucurbits is the challenge of the squash vine borer combined with the prickliness of the leaves and the scratchiness on your arms and all the work that you do to get a few squash or winter squash, So I'm not dissing it. I'm just looking at my options for what I want to grow and thinking about the challenges relative to that and the payoff versus the cost. And it's like, I don't know. So anyway, as a public service to everybody else, including myself, I want to figure it out and share that information with the world.
Right, and you're thinking, okay, all this frustration for this little harvest when I could go down the grocery store and buy them for $1 a pound or even $2 a pound, well worth the grocery store trip rather than all the frustration and plant something in that spot that I know will produce instead of all this other stuff that I got to deal with.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And I think that comes with wisdom over the years and just finally recognizing your challenges and what's worth it and what's not. And that's just a great example of I'd rather support a local farmer at the farmer's market and buy his squash and use my spot more productively.
Absolutely. So was horticultural gardening education, providing education, something that you knew you'd always want to do, or was there an indirect path and a journey to get there? And what was that journey?
I knew it was something I always wanted to do. I love that question. My mother was an English teacher, a high school English teacher. And so when I was, when I fell in love with gardening at 8 years old, I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. By the time I got to college, I said, Mom, let's talk about college. And she said, yeah. And I talked about wanting to get a horticulture degree. And she said, well, that'd be fine. But why don't you get a business degree at the same time so that when you're coming out of college, you've got better options. And she was right about that because more people were interested in a business degree than a horticultural degree. But so I entered the world coming out of college with a suit and tie job, but my heart was in horticulture and I knew that I wanted to ultimately do that. So it wasn't a direct path, but it was one in which I kept my eyes and ears open and just I believed that opportunity would present itself at some point in the future, but I just didn't know when. And I also knew that the older I got, I had 2 kids, eventually, and I still was in the professional world. And I thought, man, I've got to have something in horticulture that pays the bills because I'm doing pretty well in business, but I don't love it. And I want to be in horticulture. And that's when that opportunity with DIY Network surfaced. And I was eventually picked as their host for 3 years on their show. And that was able to replace my income. And then once that show retired, because we ran out of things to grow and we, didn't have any more options for new episodes, I was, just timing was good. And I was able to pick up another TV gig. And then eventually 3 years later, I started Growing a Greener World. And it just worked out from there. But it was because of the business degree, plus my experience with having a national presence with the DIY network. And, everything came together. And from there, it's just been a real blessing. And I've been able to make a good living at it. But it was not a direct route, that's for sure.
Well, without telling us more than we should know, that business degree, did that help you negotiate what you wanted to do and how you wanted to obtain certain things with the TV?
I think in the big picture, it really helped me think more like a business person because I had some of those skills that I think as a business, with a degree in business, you've had courses and being in business on top of that gave me a really good perspective on how to be a business person when I became self-employed with my horticulture business. And so that did help me with negotiation. It helped me think about how to build my team and my company and where to start and the things that I needed to do. And, I had a good, wide, broad perspective on the important things. And then I was able to meet the right people to help me in the specific nuances of each of the departments, of what I needed to do. But, I trademarked Joe Gardner in other brands that I've since developed since then. And with the help of other very talented people that have come on board with me, we've continued to grow. But, I had the initial general knowledge, but it was really the help from other people along the way that teamed up with me to take it to the next level.
Fantastic. So we were talking with Joe Lampel, the host of Growing a Greener World on PBS.
So let's talk about your new book. Tell us about your new book, The Vegetable Gardening Book, your complete guide to growing an edible organic garden from seed to harvest. What can you tell us about that? What is something in there that would make us want to go grab that book?
Well, okay, so here's what it would be.
Okay.
If you want to be confident and feel like you've taken the guesswork out of gardening and understand the why do behind the how to of what you do when it comes to vegetable gardening, this is that book. And the way that I wrote the book is I envisioned writing it in a way so that whoever bought that book could read the words and feel like they were hanging out with me in the garden. And it was just me and them talking gardening, and I was showing them how I do what I do and why I do what I do and the reasons why I do that thing, so that they could get it, like they'd have light bulb moments every conversation, because I've been doing this all my life and I'm good at it. And
Right.
And so I wanted to create a guidebook that helped people feel like, oh my gosh, I get it now. I feel confident. I feel like I can do this. And from the feedback I've gotten so far, the book's only been out about a week, but there's been some good feedback already. And that's pretty much what people are saying. And that's exactly what I endeavor to do. So it's teaching people the best practices for how to be an organic gardener, specifically how to be an organic vegetable gardener. And then I teach them about the Fab 40, which is the top 40 crops that people typically want to grow, and that is 20 warm season and 20 cool season crops. And so the nuances of those, kind of the down and dirty, like the baseball card, basic information that you really need to know, and then my personal experience, anecdotal information added to that particular crop for those 40 different things, so that you have what you need to know how to grow it and harvest it and store it, and the challenges you're going to have along the way with how to plant it, how to sow the seeds, how to transplant it, how to deal with pests and diseases. So it's all right there for 40 of those crops. So I've really poured myself into this and wrote it the way that I would want to have a vegetable gardening book written for me if I were that person wanting to know how to be a better gardener.
And you have other books. What number of book is this that you've written?
This is number 3. And honestly, I didn't think I was going to write number 3, because after number 2, 15 years ago, I thought I was done. And Jessica Wallisher with Cool Springs Press kept talking to me about a new book idea. And I kept saying, no. I don't have any time. I really like you and I love your company and all that, but I'm just done writing books. I don't have time. And so on this book, she contacted me one last time. She said, look, I understand you've told me no a million times. I'm throwing up a Hail Mary here. This is my last chance, but we want you to write the new vegetable gardening book. We want to write the new go-to guide for gardening for vegetables. You're the one we want to write. You're the one we want to write it. And we don't think there's anybody else that can do it better than you. We see you as that person. And before she told me what the topic was, I said, Jessica, I like you very much, but before you tell me what this is, there's a 99.9% chance I'm going to say no to whatever you're about to tell me is the topic. And then when she said it's on vegetable gardening, my heart sank, because I felt like I needed to be the person to write that book.
Right.
So I said, yeah.
Well, let's talk about what we're getting in the fall here. Leaves are going to start to fall in a few weeks, if not already in some parts of the country. What is the importance of using leaves, and how do you use them best on your property in your garden?
Well, leaves are a really fantastic mulch. First of all, they're free. And when you allow them to shred them or break them down, whether you mow over them or you buy a leaf shredder or a weed whacker and you chop them up, and then you just store them in basically a fenced corral, as I call it, for 5 or 6 months, they start to break down. So I call them semi-composted. So if you go from fall to spring in that state where they're breaking down after they've been shredded, you have the most incredible leaf mold or leaf mulch that you can easily spread onto your raised beds or your in-ground beds or wherever you're going to mulch. And it's already going to work because it's already breaking down. So you've got an input that's going to improve your soil as it continues to biodegrade, while at the same time providing that protective surface over your soil to protect that, as well as suppress weeds, as well as to provide nutrients to your plants, as well as to avoid runoff and erosion and mitigate compaction to your soil, and all the things that mulch does. But by virtue of using the leaves, many times, like for example, Holly and Joey, in my town, the subdivisions require that homeowners remove the leaves from their yard. They consider them unsightly and an eyesore, and they need them to be moved. So these homeowners have to bag them up and set them on the curb, and the trash companies come and pick them up, and they don't take them to a composting or a recycling center. They throw them into the solid waste with everything else. So all of this beautiful organic matter is being thrown away and wasted and becoming, methane gas. And so I see this opportunity to say to these homeowners, hey, if you'll let me know when you're going to put your leaves out in these bags, I'll come pick them up and take them home. And here's this extra step that I do. There's a lot of beneficial insects that overwinter in leaves. And so if I were to take all those leaves and shred them up, I'm running the risk of potentially killing some really good beneficial insects that are overwintering there. Yet keep in mind that 100% of those leaves in those bags that I would not have picked up would have gone to the landfill, in which case they would have died anyway. So by my picking them up and taking them home, my deal with myself, I take half the bags that I collect, and I collect about 350 bags a season, and I dump out half of them onto my landscape native plant beds. And so they remain intact. I basically free the leaves. That's the term I use. I free the leaves into my bed. And then the other half, rather than them going to the landfill, are the ones I shred, and I'm composting them. And so therefore I'm feeding microbes and earthworms in the soil food web and using them as mulch in my garden beds. So I think it's a really good win-win-win, very good compromise that I can continue to remain organic with the leaves that I collected from my neighbors, while half of them have been returned back to the landscape, so that whatever beneficial insects have overwintered there continue to live out their life and then come on back in the spring.
Good advice for all of us. Before I ask you how we can get a hold of your book and more information about you, people who are listening, they have been a fan of yours for years. They've seen episode after episode of Growing a Greener World. And I want you to acknowledge that you've got all kinds of awards for that program. You don't have a bus full of crew members. It was a very, very, and it is a very small operation to make this production so professional.
Thank you. We're, what I say, very lean and mean. We're efficient. We don't have a big budget. If we had a bigger budget, we'd have more people. But by virtue of the fact that we only have so many dollars to put it in the show, I can't afford a big crew. And we've also learned, I've got a very talented team. It's a small, mighty team, but we're very good at what we do. And we've been doing it a long time. So, I remember, I'll never forget, and I don't know if I can say it the way I heard it, but one time we were on location and we showed up in our SUV or our minivan with all our stuff in it. And the person we were going to feature asked us, they said, well, where are the other trucks? Where are the rest of the trucks? When's the equipment van show up? And we're like, well, this is it. This is everything. We're all right here, packed up in the Subaru or the minivan or whatever it was. And we did our show. We were with them for 2 days, and we got everything we needed, but we worked our tails off the whole day. They saw how efficient we were and how well we worked together and how well we knew each other, and we knew what we were there to do, and we knew how to do it. So we did it, and we directed them, we coached them, we got what we needed. We didn't cut anybody off. We really were good at making use of our time. But at the end of the day, at the end of the second day, actually, that person said, I've watched your shows. I was always in awe, but now when I look at how you do that, she said, if people knew how hard you worked to make these shows look so good with a team that's so mighty but small, they would be in awe, something like that. And it was a huge compliment, but it was a real affirmation in the fact that is exactly how it is. You learn to do what you can do. You combine your talents and your gifts, and you make the most of what you have with the budget that you have. and we've been doing that long enough to do it. And, honestly, we've been doing it since the first year. I mean, we hit the ground running in season 1, but it was because I knew good people and they came together, and we had talent and skills and gifts, and everybody came together, and we've never slowed down from that. We just recognize that as there's the reason for the success. It's not one person, it's a team, and it's just being efficient and working well together.
Well, that being said, how can people find more about you? How can they get a hold of your book? And where do we go?
Well, I think the single best place is joegardner.com. And that's my website that's got links to everything else. You can get to the YouTube channels. You can get to the book. You can get to our podcast, The Joe Gardner Show, and the television show, Growing a Greener World. And on Instagram, during the week, I hang out mostly on Instagram, and that handle is at Joe Gardner as well. So that's a good single source to find me. And, if anybody reaches out to me, however they do that, I'll eventually see it, and I'll respond to them if they are asking a question or soliciting some sort of response.
Well, Joe, we greatly appreciate the time you have granted Holly, myself, and all of our listeners. Thank you very much for that.
It is my pleasure, you guys. You have a good one.
Absolutely.
Thank you. For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.